First of all, just tell me, you're the president of the Texas Panhandle War Memorial, and you organize memorials for veterans. You've dedicated a lot of your time to honoring veterans, so tell me about that.
Well, I'm very proud of that because being around veterans to me is it's an honor, because every one of them have experienced different things in life, you know, and even before and after their experiences with combat. And I'm not speaking of just the Army, I'm speaking of all the branches of the service, and you get to talking to them and everything, but sometimes you don't want to talk too much, you know, and they won't talk too much either. So it's just, it's a real togetherness, a unity that we have at the War Memorial and away from the War Memorial.
It's kind of something nobody else has experienced but,
No.
but you and that other person.
Right. A lot of times you almost experience the same things, but whenever you're in different units, some might be tankers, some might be infantry like I was, others would be artillery and mortars. So then you got your intelligence people, but of course they're the background. But yes, it's very interesting to be able to talk to them and then find out what they did, you know, during the war. Some of the Navy, you know, like Seabees, and they went down to Mekong Delta and patrolled that, which is, they called them, they were on rat patrol, and kind of like, and, but it's very interesting in what you know, you think, you know what you did, but then you ask the others, and then, oh, okay, well then you supported us. And then you got your gunships, the people that flew the gunships, and also the Air Force that helped us out quite a bit with napalm and all that stuff to clear areas. And so it's very interesting to be able to speak with these people.
Tell me about your service in particular. You're from Borger originally? Okay. Did you enlist or were you drafted?
No, I enlisted,
Okay.
and then I re-enlisted. So I stayed in 9 years.
How old were you when you went in? About?
I'm gonna say probably what, 21?
And why did you
20.
choose to enlist?
Well, I seen a sign one day, and it said, you know, that Uncle Sam, it says, "I want you." And it took me a while, but I finally did it. And then I said, well, I'm gonna go ahead and go in and not wait for that card for them to tell me to go. I want to do it on my own, because I said, I know that Vietnam is starting up, and I want to be there. I want to help as much as I can in the military. Well, after the first 3 years, then I said, I think I'll stay some more. But I hadn't gone to Vietnam yet. So between Germany, Korea, and Germany, that right there just kept me in, because my first tour abroad was during the Berlin crisis, the airlift. That was my first after I was at Fort Hood. And,
what year would that have been?
1961.
Okay.
And it was in November of '61 they sent us over. And this is when the East and the West in Berlin were having problems, and of course with the Czechoslovakian as well. And so I went on that one, stayed there like 8 months, and then they sent me back to the States. But that was a good experience as far as being real close to almost combat, because we couldn't shoot. They could shoot at us, but we couldn't shoot at them on the Czechoslovakian border. And there I was with the recon unit, and that's what I was doing in the military. And so that got me going. And then after that, then my 3 years was up. I said, no, I'm going to re-enlist for six more, because my obligation is 6 years anyway. And so, yes, I could have enlisted for 3, but I said, no, I'll just go ahead and make it 6. And I did.
So you were anticipating already the Vietnam would be.
At some time or another, I figured that I would be. And a lot of us, when we were in Korea in '65, I was with the 1st Battalion, 72nd Armor on the DMZ. And then everybody started getting orders because we'd already completed our 13-month tour. And a lot of them, most of them, that were ready to come back to the States were given orders to go to Vietnam. And so some of my friends had to go there. Well, my orders was to go to Germany again. So we kind of split, but yeah, I just knew that it was going to happen. Well, it did happen in '67. I got my orders, and I was in Germany that in 2 weeks, and I was to report, you know, and then go to Vietnam.
Okay, so what were conditions like in '67 when you
Bad.
arrived? Bad.
Bad.
Okay.
Bad. They really started getting, as far as people getting rowdy and all that, riots and stuff, and that actually started about '65. And when we started losing a lot of people in Vietnam, and then it just escalated in '66. And needless to say, when I came back at the end in October of '68, it was worse. And so, you know, a lot of units were told not to wear their uniforms anywhere. And so, but yeah, 65 was really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And
So you arrive in Vietnam, and what is your post and what is your job?
well, whenever we shipped out, we went to, they took us over to Fort Lewis, Washington. And we left from there. And we were going to Vietnam, where we were getting instructions on the plane. I mean, you're briefed already on combat, what you're going to have to be doing, what to look for. And then we had a little extra layover in Guam because there was a typhoon in Vietnam. So we stayed there for about 6 hours, so that's 6 more hours of lectures and, I mean, instructions and stuff like that on what to expect. Well, it was a good thing really on what they told us, because of the fact that whenever we landed, right before we landed, that we were told, your equipment is going to be waiting for you. So don't hesitate, don't take your time about anything. Just grab your duffel bag and go, because you're going to get your weapons, you're going to get your helmet, all of this stuff. You're going to load up on the truck and you're going to go to the unit that, and I can tell you that most of you are going to go to the 1st Infantry Division, and which was the Big Red One. And well, I was already in the Big Red One, and so that was good. So once we got there, it was, you know, they're telling you this and that, but when you land and then you see the people, I mean, they're still bombing. Mm-hmm. You can see the bombs going off way in the distance. Then everybody just looked at each other and said, this is real. You know, but we didn't know what to expect. But then after we landed, it said, I mean, fear is already there, you know, and it's going to stay with you. And if anybody ever says that they're not scared, that's a lie, because it stays with you the whole time. And but yeah, they rushed us through there, and we replaced, or no, we didn't replace. We actually fulfilled some of the spots, some of the vacancies in the 2nd Battalion, 28th Infantry, which is a Black Lion, and the 1st Infantry Division. And so they had lost so many And just the week before, they lost half of just about half of a battalion.
How many people would that be?
Well, then it's supposed to be like about 500, but not in Vietnam. You never had the complement. You never had your complement at all.
You weren't fully staffed anywhere?
No.
Okay.
You were all shorthanded all the time. I mean, you're losing a lot of soldiers, Marines, say, and also the sailors. When we ever say sailors, we're talking about the ones that are on the Mekong Delta, the Navy that's on ground. There's a lot of them that stayed on ship all the time, and but everyone was losing, and especially the infantry, because you're out in the jungle. The Marine Corps the same way, and they were going in. Well, they brought us in Tan Son Nhut, right close to Saigon, and the others had to go to Da Nang, and but those are mostly the Marine Corps, because you have 4 corps in Vietnam. You have I Corps, 2 Corps, 3 Corps, and 4 Corps. You start with I Corps is the ones that are right on the north and south, splitting the North and South Vietnam. And then you come down, that's the 2 Corps, and then it goes down to 3 Corps, and then 4 is around the Mekong Delta down at the bottom. Well, I was assigned to the 3 Corps, which is approximately 30 kilometers north and northwest of Saigon. And so we were real close, and my base there was Lai Khe. And it's just real close to the Iron Triangle, the Hobo Woods, Cu Chi, that you know, and I know that people have talked about tunnels of Cu Chi.
Yes.
And you know, being small like I am, I was no bigger than what I am now. And so, needless to say, my squad was nobody was heavy or big or anything, because we were the first ones that were going to go in those tunnels if we had to.
I can't imagine.
Oh, there was no fun. And it's very scary, you know, whenever you're out on patrols, and see, they put us in about 2 days after we got in there and landed. 2 days later, we were out in the field, and we were doing day patrols and night patrols, and not knowing exactly what we really had to do, because we haven't experienced anything. Well, after on the second day, we did, because we got ambushed, and but it wasn't by a big unit. It was a small unit that pinned us down, and with the snipers, and you can't see them because they're all in the tall trees, and they're camouflaged, and they're tied to the trees, so they're not going anywhere, but they're going to keep you down. But after that, there was no problem. But whenever we went out, we wouldn't go just for 1 day or 2 days. We'd go for a week or 2 weeks and get resupplied and everything else. But the helicopter, just like the one we've got, that was our transportation. And that right there, to me and to a lot of people, that was Vietnam. Mm-hmm. That saved Vietnam right there. That's the way we got around. And so now we call ours at the Moore Memorial, that's a Vietnam veteran, because it was. And but as far as other experiences that I had over there was, and the scary, not just getting ambushed or you going on night patrol and you set up an ambush or whatever. It was going and looking and seeking tunnels. Mm-hmm. And once you find them, you got to be careful, because every one of them, if they weren't there, they were booby-trapped. And they covered them up so well that you had to be real careful. And after a little bit of time being there, then you knew what to look for. And we had I had a good platoon leader, real nice, and the company commander was real good too. Yeah, they were. You don't have these people that are demanding when you're in combat, because you've got to work together. You can't have conflicts between you and the other. And I know that you've heard of friendly fire. Well, that happened. That could happen real easy. So everybody got along pretty well. And but yeah, we had some good leadership. And of course, what was really sad is that a lot of them didn't come back because they had some designation somewhere on them that told the people that they were officers. Oh. Well, that's what they want first, is your officers. And normally, most of the time, the RTO, which is a radio operator, would be right next to the platoon leader or company commander or whatever. And but some units, and I know that Alpha Company, which I was in, we didn't have any officers that were not in the middle or in the front, close to the front.
They didn't hang back and let you do the...
They wanted to be up there. And they did, but some of them, like I said, there was a turnover. It was real bad on officers. And at times, we'd get into, there was one firefight that we lost, both the company commander and the platoon leader. And everybody got promoted up. And I did, and especially like during the Tet Offensive. It was so nasty, but sergeants had to be platoon leaders. Mm-hmm. And you had to just step up and take charge. And if you didn't have but 15 or 20 left, then you had to lead them. And just do what you've been taught to do. And we did. It was tough, but like I said earlier, people weren't going to fight with you. They're not going to argue with you. They're going to listen to you. And this is what it was.
What was your closest call?
I don't say that during the Tet Offensive. The Tet Offensive was bad. That was the truce. There was a truce. There was a 72-hour delay where everybody was kind of resting, slacked up. Of course, we still had our perimeters and everything, but we were out in the field. And during that period of time, and history will tell you that we paused, or they paused, for our New Year. So therefore, Washington decided, yeah, we're going to go ahead and do it too, for theirs. During theirs, we kind of slacked off, and we kept our promise. We weren't supposed to be attacking or anything like that. What they were doing is moving down to Cambodia and Laos borders. And they were getting ready. And on the last day of the truce, they moved across in columns. They hit every big city on the way. They took it and went right straight this way. Yeah, they hit smaller units like us, and then others. But they took the cities in there in between. But what was their objective? Saigon. And they got there. But they overran everybody else and took them. They used us as more or less like a decoy. And while they're going over there and taking the main force was the one that took over Saigon. But they didn't actually take it over. They did a lot of damage, but and there was a lot of casualties, civilian and military. But whenever they even got into the embassy. But after all of that, they failed. They didn't get to take over like they did. They wanted to. So their mission was short. And then after that, it was the counteroffensive, take over everything else that they had taken over. And that was bad because it was constant moving. You just go, and sometimes you run out of supplies, and you have to wait for them, and especially ammo. You know, then waiting on food, and that wasn't that important. And water, yeah, we could go ahead and fill up our canteens when it was raining or whatever, and they'd give us these tablets to put in there to make it taste good, but it didn't taste good. As long as it was wet, it was all right. So it wasn't too bad. But the VC, they knew whenever they see a Chinook and bringing in water and supplies and all of that, they'd surround that because we'd throw smoke. Well, that's automatically a giveaway, but we have to fight for it.
Just to get your supplies.
And sometimes we didn't succeed, and we were just overmanned.
Was there, as you were going along during all this, did you think it was winnable? Did you wonder why you're there? What were your thoughts?
I never felt that we would lose.
Okay.
This is what you have to. You've got to feel it. You got to say no. If I'm going to go, fine, but I'm going to give it 110. And this is the way we were looking at it. A lot of people, you know, whenever you get there at the start, you don't know whether you're going to go back home or not. So if you're there on that ground, I'll be darned if I'm going to give up. I'll keep going. And we all did. And like I said, it doesn't really matter to us, but we're on a mission, okay? And this we'll defend. And that was our motto. Mm-hmm. And we did.
So, were there, when you were in country, what were the conditions, just the physical conditions like?
Well, you know, whenever I got back and I went to Livermore VA hospital because of my leg, as soon as I got out of there, I was supposed to ETS and get out and spend a few months and recoup and everything else at Fort Ord. Well, Livermore VA is just a little north of San Francisco. And, but they had to take us and kind of like hide you. And whenever you leave and you go anywhere without uniform, and, but the people were just, they were bad.
Well, San Francisco was a difficult place as far as protests were going.
Oh,
correct?
yes. Mm-hmm. All along Highway 1, and they tried to go around the areas and everything else. And, but yeah, we got off of the bus and everything else, and they were right there around Fort Ord as well, and cussing and just You know, if you got real close, which they can, and a lot of them got spit on and cussed at, and I mean, it was bad.
Is that hard to believe from your own country?
Mm-hmm. Especially when you've gone over there and you've got your friends and you've left them there, and then you come back and you see that. No, they need to go over there and experience that, because they're over there for your country. They're there to fight for your freedom. That's communism over there. They're communists. They were being supplied by Russia. They were being supplied by China. And all they want to do is just take that strategic area so they can get closer to the United States again. That's all it was. But they don't understand the price that was paid. 58,249 people killed for America's freedom. And these jerks are doing this? No, I could never accept that. And it still bothers me. And it still bothers me. And whenever I hear all of this stuff about, you know, in '69, it really got bad.
Mm-hmm.
It really got bad, even in New York and Washington and all of that. But that shows me the weakness that some of these American people had as far as minds. They didn't care. They didn't care whether you was going over there and getting killed. All they were, I mean, you hear this, you baby killers. All you're doing is killing babies and women and all that. You just don't understand. Those little 3 or 4-year-olds had bombs strapped to them. They were, and the women. You don't understand what we went through. You go into a village, yeah, you might see 3 or 4, but they've got some weapons with them. And
It was warfare unlike anything we'd ever seen before, correct?
yes, yeah. I hope we never experience that again. And of course, I was kind of waiting for after 9/11 that I was just going to see what would happen, because that's the next thing that Iraq and Afghanistan. Not so much the Persian Gulf, because it was quick. And but that didn't happen. That didn't happen. And the government, I have to blame the government for this too, because actually they didn't back up the people that fought in Vietnam like they were doing in Iraq and Afghanistan. You could see it. It was plain.
You think they learned a lesson from
I
what
think-
you experienced?
After a while, see, I don't know. I never got into politics.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that that's where a lot of it was.
So maybe that's just a generation like yours that is in charge at that point and can do things differently.
Maybe.
I don't know.
I know that went on for years and years. And when you figure from 1975, when the was over, then when the last troops were pulled out of there, right before that, 74, I believe it was, that when Nixon stopped it, Vietnam veterans did not get nothing at all, no assistance, okay? They never even tried to, the government didn't even try to evaluate these people to see what condition they're in, okay, to help them mentally, physically, and all of that. because a lot of the people came back with Agent Orange, okay?
Right.
And right now they're still dying from it.
Mm-hmm.
I lost a brother last week. We buried him. We had the ceremony last week, and that's what it was. It was Agent Orange. Well, we know that they can't detect it right then, but they can detect it a little bit later. But they never want to admit that it was Agent Orange. But you know, when the war was over, like I said, in '74, the Vietnam veterans really didn't get much attention medically until 2000. And finally they started waking up a little bit. But why didn't they do it before?
Yeah.
Because the government was just like the protesters to me. They didn't care. They weren't over there. They were over here where it was safe. Why are they safe? It's because of them that were over there.
How old were you when you went over there? About?
I was 25. I got there in October for the 1st of '67. And I turned 26 in January. So happy birthday to me.
Right. And you spent how long over there?
Well, our tours are only 12 months.
Okay.
You know, they get you out as soon as you're 12 months. And see, my brother, he was, I think he had 8 months left in the service when I got out of Vietnam. Well, they stationed him in Bangkok, where it was real close. So whenever I left country, then they put him in there because they couldn't put two brothers in at the same time. That was the law. And but they had him ready, and he was in the 82nd Airborne, and which was in 2 Corps. And so that's a little bit closer up. And but thank goodness he came back okay.
He made it back. So then we get to this point where, as you know, I told you we're working on this project with Panhandle PBS, where we're hoping to chronicle the stories of our Vietnam veterans and others who were have stories related to the war. What do you think is important for us to get out of doing such a project?
Well, I think it's just like I was saying, that everyone that is there, they have a different MOS, okay? Their jobs are different. And I think knowing and getting this information from each one, then you can get it all together and you can say, well, it's just not just the infantry. They don't go and go through the jungles like we did. And because the artillery is back here, but they're helping that infantry, okay? So you get everybody's perspective on what they actually do and how they save lives. Because if we get pinned down like in rice paddies or whatever and can't get back, now that's out in the open, and where we're surrounded because they're in the jungle and you can't see them. And so then we had to call in either airstrikes or artillery, or use our mortars to try to get in there. But using our mortars, you don't have that many with you whenever you're on patrol. But you could get everybody's idea and say, well, how did you help out? How did y'all do with the artillery? Well, we opened up areas and got the enemy back, okay? The same with the gunships. And they'd come in and they'd shoot the rockets in there wherever we were shooting. And of course, coordinates, you know. And of course, our equipment wasn't the best in the West, you know. And our compasses, you know, and you just had to rely on a map and get a coordinates, because a compass half the time it would be wrong. And you didn't want them to drop that stuff on you, which a few times they came pretty close. And whenever you hear that thing go and then a shell goes right over your head and then it explodes real quick, they say, hey, you back off. You're within 50 yards of us. You know, so like I said, you know, everybody had a different job, and they did it to the max. And
Think we'll gain an appreciation for how that all works by listening to.
oh, I think so. I think so.
It's difficult for veterans. It seems like, especially of the Vietnam War, to talk about their experiences.
Well, there's some things that I don't talk about that happened, okay? And there are some things that I can talk about. And how we did this and how we did that.
Right.
But there's things that I can't, and I won't, because they eat me up. I have a sleeping problem. I do have PTSD real bad, and the slightest noise, outside, inside, or whatever, and
Put you back there?
yeah, and you know, and a lot of people have that. You'll get flashbacks and everything.
Yeah.
You know
You
what
said
I mean? Going back to hand-to-hand combat, waking up and you're right there with them, looking at you right here. You know, and I'm sorry, I you know, and I know that they have nothing to do with it here, but the ones that are here, the Vietnamese, a lot of times that bothers me too.
I was going to ask you how I mean, we wound up with a good number of refugees from the Vietnam War.
Politics.
Yeah, but is that, how do you
Well, like I
deal?
said, I know it's not them because they're another generation, and the ones that we were fighting, but the parents about the same age, and so that it does bother me. But and I've got, I mean, you talk about their kids and everything, and they're just as nice as they can be. But the way I remember Vietnamese is over there, and it comes back to me. This is my flashbacks too. And but I don't sit there and start jumping all over them or anything like that. And I'll just go and. But yeah, I'm sure it bothers a lot of other people too.
You said you had a leg that you were recovering. Were you injured in?
Yeah, yes. I got shrapnel
Okay.
all up in here on my side. This right here took part of my lip. I guess you can see that right there.
Okay.
And my jaw's off a little bit. But yeah, it's that to me, you know, it's a good fix. I mean, they fixed me up pretty good. Of course, it took them 3 surgeries to get that together, but
Yeah.
there's some people, you know, like I was saying, you see them laying there and you can't do anything. They're missing an arm or a leg or both. And then you come back to what we did. It's sad. It's real sad.
Do we all need to sit and spend time with somebody like you that can tell us?
I don't know, it's kind of, I'm getting a little knot just even trying to think of that stuff, because you know, at times, you know, I can, when I'm sleeping or trying to sleep, and I have those flashbacks, you could almost smell when you're walking and you after an extensive firefight, and then you go and try to clean up and get your own people out, and then you leave, and then the next day, as hot as it is and humid, and you know, you see your enemy laying out there too. That smell is not good smell, and that just sticks to you. And it really is just like I don't know if you've ever smelled blood that's just laying out and everything else. Mm-hmm. It's pretty rank.
I would agree with you, sir. Well, I appreciate your taking the time to go through some difficult conversation, but I think there's something we can learn.
I think you can learn from a lot of people the same thing. And they'll be willing to tell you some, and you know, that you don't know, and that I don't know that they did. And because even the artillery people, you know, they have incoming also, you know, and they experience trying to do a job too, but then they're getting fired on at the same time. And you got your machine gunners. I mean, those guys, they never complained. You're carrying 50 caliber machine guns or 30 caliber machine guns with all that ammo, and they've got to be strong, and they got to be strong-willed, and they're not going to give up either. And they went through a lot. And for me, as a squad leader, you know, I had my people. Most of the time, I just had 6, but that I was responsible for. Well, I was responsible for all, but 6 that were attached to me that we'd, if they said, okay, you got some tunnels over here, you gotta sweep them out, okay? You don't say no, you just go. But and nobody complained.
Well, thank you for taking the time.
You're very welcome.